Welcome to Barnyard Language, honest talk about running farms and raising families. We are Katie and Arlene, an Iowa sheep farmer and an Ontario dairy farmer, with 6 kids, 2 husbands, and a whole lot of chaos between us.
While this is a podcast for farm families, sometimes our content isn't for the whole family. So kick off your boots, reheat your coffee, and join us for some Barnyard Language.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Barnyard Language, Polar Vortex version here anyway, maybe where you are too, Katie. What is happening on the farm? What's new?
It is very, very cold. It is January 20th, so it is Inauguration Day where we are. You can take that news how you will.
You're not there, so in attendance, I mean.
I'm not at the inauguration. I'm still in the country in which the inauguration is occurring, and that is enough for me. Yes, it is very, very cold, and kids are out of school for the Martin Luther King Day holiday. Jim is sick. The kids are healthy.
Is that a coincidence or intentional that that happens on the same day as Inauguration Day? I don't know enough about my American holidays, I guess.
I feel like Inauguration Day is always January 20th, but maybe it's not. I mean, it only happens every 4 years, so
Sure, yeah.
I guess I don't really know.
Maybe it moves around. Maybe it's a bit on a certain day of the week or something following the election.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like it would ever be on like a Sunday or anything, but I have no idea, I guess. I'm really out of date on these things. Anyway, sorry, it's been a long day already, and it is 10:20 in the morning.
Especially when we have an interview in a few minutes.
How are things at your place, Arlene?
Things are okay. It was a rough week last week, I will admit. I mean, there was some good in it. My husband and I did get away like we had hoped to the Dairy Farmers of Ontario annual meeting. So that is always a fun time away, a good time to learn a lot of things and also see lots of people that we don't normally see. So traveled on the train with friends and played cards all the way to Toronto, which was pretty fun too. There was lots of both wine and cheese at the wine and cheese, and we partook in all of it. And yeah, there were meetings, banquets, spent some time with friends, that kind of stuff. So that was good. On the not so good side, my paternal grandmother passed away last week at the age of 97. So, we got her for a lot of years, and she lived all of her years very fully and was always very much present with us. I know not everyone has that opportunity to have someone for their whole life to always be the same person that they were. I mean, a lot of people in their later years or even not so late years end up with different forms of dementia or memory loss or those types of things. So I do consider ourselves really lucky that she was with us, and even on our final visits, which we knew were going to be our final visits, we got to have really good conversations and learn things about her that we didn't know, because when you know it's your last time, you ask some of those questions. So it was bittersweet for sure. I mean, to be able to know that we were saying goodbye was really special, but saying goodbye is never easy. So yeah, that was last week. And then this week will be the other things that are bittersweet, right? Seeing family, being together with all the people who loved her in one place is going to be pretty special too. So yeah, we're working on funeral arrangements. My grandma was a quilter in a big way. So one of the things we're doing is, a few years ago, I saw a picture online. I don't even know if it was a quilt show or if it was a funeral service, but of a church filled with quilts, with them being all on the backs of the pews. So one of the things we're doing is all of us are going around our houses and collecting up all of the things that she stitched for us, which is really special too, because each of them has a name tag on it for who it was for and the occasion and those types of things too. And the wedding quilt that's on my bed was one that she and I stitched together, because she had gotten to the point where she said she wasn't going to hand quilt the wedding quilts anymore for grandkids. There are 20 of us. And so she said if I wanted a hand quilted quilt, I was going to have to help her with us. And she had been teaching me to quilt over the years before I got married 20 some years ago. And so knowing that quilt has her stitches and mine in it together is pretty special, which makes it even more valuable to me when it already was a pretty special gift. So yeah, that's some of my grandma, little bits.
It's really nice that she put the name tags in them as well, because it's so easy to not know where things came from pretty quickly. If you weren't the first recipient of them, it can be very easy to lose track of how things came to be in your home.
Yeah, that's right. It's a good reminder as a crafter, for you and I, Katie, that we should do that kind of thing. Put a little extra effort at the end. Sometimes it feels like when you finish something too, you just want to get it off to the person you made it for. But one of those little name tags or something with our initial on it or something would be a good idea to put on the things that we create. Yeah, because each baby quilt or wedding quilt, or I got one as a housewarming gift one time. They all have her name on them, and usually what they were for. So that makes them special too. And it's in her handwriting. So
Ironically enough, I actually received a baby quilt when a girl child was born from Janice Marquardt, who has been a previous guest on our show. Sent me a lovely quilt with, thankfully, a tag about where it came from, which was lovely to have it noted where it came from. Because especially things like baby quilts, I mean, between quilts and Afghans, you tend to get a lot of them, and B, the child isn't going to remember where they came from because baby.
yeah, they were present, but they weren't aware of all the things that got gifted to them.
And I think I speak for all of us that I would love to see some photos of your grandma's quilts, because
Thank you. Yes, I will do that.
it's always such a thing to see, especially a lifetime that long, that much work. I'm sure she did a lot of quilts if she was still cranking them out for 20 grandkids.
Yeah, there's 20 grandkids and 40 great grandkids and 3 great greats at this point. So, yes, she was very prolific. The last few years, she had stopped quilting and had conceded to knitting, because that she could do, in a more seated position. And quilting, there's a lot of getting up and down and using a sewing machine and that kind of stuff. So she was still crafting. And then she had moved from blankets to dishcloths in the last maybe year or so, because her attention span was getting shorter. But she was still creating things. So that was pretty cool.
It seems like folks who have that drive are going to find a way to use it
Yes, yeah.
no matter what.
Yeah, we don't like to have idle hands for very long.
Idle hands are the devil's plaything.
There you go. All right. Well, on that happy note, why don't we go ahead and introduce our guest for this week?
All right.
Today we are talking to Lisa Foust Prater, who is joining us like Katie from Iowa. So Lisa, we start each of our interviews with the exact same question. So this is your way to introduce yourself to our listeners. And we always ask, what are you growing? So that can be kids and livestock and crops and all kinds of other things. We know how farmers are, but can also include businesses and whatever else you think you're growing. So Lisa, what are you growing?
Well, right now I'm kind of growing an empty nest. It's a different sort of thing for me the past couple of years. Our oldest son graduated. He's a sophomore in college right now, so we're sort of a little bit into this empty nest thing. And so our oldest son is just graduated from college. Our middle and our younger son are in college, so we are sort of in a new phase. We used to raise cattle. My husband and I had a herd, and then we sort of transitioned out so that our boys could each have their own herd and use our land. And that's the money that they used to go toward tuition. So they raised their own herds and did all the work and all the everything, and are paying their way through school, which we're very proud of them for that. And so now when our youngest son left, so did the cattle. And so now I'm kind of raising a corgi and 2 cats and a turtle. And I'm also trying to grow. My mother had a very green thumb, and I inherited her plants. And so I'm trying to keep them alive. So that's what I'm trying to grow right now.
Now, can I ask, did the turtle come from one of the kids, or was that your passion?
Yeah, so Killer the turtle, each each of my kids when they were like in kindergarten or first grade got a small pet of their own. And it started when my oldest won the kindergarten class goldfish at the end of the year in a drawing and got off the bus with a peanut butter jar and 2 goldfish in it.
What a prize.
I know. And those things swam in my kitchen until he was a sophomore. So, yes.
And so Killer the turtle belongs to my middle son Luke, and we got him 14 years ago when he was like the size of a quarter, and now um, he's a little bigger than that, but he's swimming happily right next to me in his tank, and he will be moving out when Luke graduates, and so I'm gonna miss him because he's my little office mate, and he's a fun little pet. He's like a little excited puppy in his little habitat.
And that's a good office pet that you can kind of look at and hang out with, but doesn't climb on your desk or mess with the keyboard or interrupt online meetings, right?
Yeah, so true. I have had my cat, walk across my face in the middle of an interview before. That's always professional. But yeah, the turtle's good. He does climb out and claw at the glass when I'm talking because he wonders what the heck's going on. But yeah, he's a fun little pet.
So, Lisa, is it safe to assume that if your boys raised cattle to pay for college, that they're probably at Iowa State then?
Well, actually, they are at Northwest Missouri State. Yeah, so we are in South Central Iowa. We're only a couple hours from Maryville, and my husband actually went to Northwest Missouri State, as did his mother and his grandmother. So they didn't have to go there, but they did have to give it a look, and they kind of always, it was kind of in their blood, and they always sort of felt like that's where they were going to be. And it's we have my husband's the farm where he grew up in Southwest Iowa, which is about an hour from Maryville. So that's nice too. We can go down there and stay and pop over and see the boys on a weekend. So it's pretty handy.
If you guys are cattle people that far south in Iowa, I guarantee we know people in common.
I'm sure that we do. I'm sure that we do. We weren't like big cattle people. We didn't have a ton of cattle, but just enough to, the thing about cattle is if you have two or if you have 200, I mean, you still got to build fence. You still got to go out when it's cold. You got to do all the things. And, it was such a shocking, such a shocking change when the cattle left. And it was very emotional, really. Like I was kind of surprised at how hard it was for me. I was kind of sad about it.
How old were your boys when they started taking over? Really, being actively involved in the business?
Yeah. So when each of them were born, my father-in-law gave them each a heifer. So they had that they sort of just we would sell the calf, and keep them in with our herd, and that would be their little, seed money. And then when they were in, junior high and starting to kind of get into FFA and those kinds of things, then that's when they really started thinking about it more of like, I could be making some money with this. And of course, it helped that, we had the land and my husband and I paid their expenses for them. So they really just, they had really a pretty good deal out of the whole thing. But yeah, junior high and high school, they started, of course, they've always helped out as soon as they were old enough to, do that. But they really took it on and worked together and managed fence and figured out, you know, when they wanted to sell and all those kinds of things, and took that on when they were, junior high school. So they did a really good job.
So, what is your ag background?
So I have been with successful farming for 25 years, and that in and of itself is, I mean, I've just learned so much about agriculture, different kinds of agriculture, just from that experience and talking to different kinds of farmers. Um, I've I've loved that so much and learned so many things. And I know that you're involved in dairy, and that's one of the things that I have just really loved learning about as well. I did not grow up on a farm. My parents both come from farm families. Um, I lived in South Central Iowa, and then also when I was a child in Northwest South Dakota. So I have lots of farms in the family. My husband grew up on a farm in Southwest Iowa. So I kind of came at it when I married him, and my father-in-law gave us a couple of cattle when we bought our farm up here, and that's kind of how we got started. And I was just, I was willing to give it to just, give it the old college try, and here we are.
I love that your father-in-law is the type of person who's like, there's a special occasion, here's a cow.
Oh my gosh, yes. He was the best. He really was. And that kind of rubbed off on my husband and on us, and like we laugh about for our 18th anniversary, which was some years ago. We we our gift to each other was a new bull, and we're like, "Wait, 18, is that like, is it China? No, I think it's a Angus, I think is what 18 is." So that's what we did.
Arlene, we should make an alternate uh, anniversary gift list for farmers and ranchers.
That's a very good idea.
Yeah, that is a good idea. Yeah. Power tools, livestock.
Yeah, I mean, Lisa, we got a heifer for our engagement gift from my in-laws too. So maybe it's just an Iowa thing, but I feel like we've heard it from other guests as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think my father-in-law was just so happy that, we were gonna sort of pursue that sort of life, and when we and our children were his only, they're all of the grandparents' only grandchildren. So they all just went ape, when like they were born. So the fact that he could give each of them a little heifer calf when they were born was like he was over the moon.
That's very cool. So, in your years with successful farming, I was curious about what kinds of stories you really feel drawn to, and how do you kind of keep motivated to keep looking for new stories all the time? I know some of them, as podcasters, some of them come to us, but there's also a lot of research and looking for those stories. So, what are your favorites, and how do you keep the motivation to keep looking for new stuff?
Yeah, honestly, like finding the stories sometimes is the hardest part of the whole process. Uh it help, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and now it's great because things like being on LinkedIn or following different, groups on Facebook, like commodity groups and different extension groups and stuff. If they highlight someone who seems interesting, I'll just reach out to them and be like, "Hey, can you introduce me to this person? They sound like someone I should be talking to." And then just from meeting farmers and folks that, I'll go to Commodity Classic or I go to lots of women in ag events. They're like my favorite thing. And so, I meet a lot of people that way. And, I do get emails from folks with recommendations, which I also love. But my favorite thing about it, and my favorite kind of story, is just I just love talking to people, to farmers, and sort of kind of digging into their life story, and everybody has a story, and there's always something great in there, and I just like finding that. That's just such a fun little I don't know. It's kind of like a puzzle sometimes. People will say, "Oh, I don't really have a story. I'm just a farmer," but there's no just to anything. Like, you have a great story. You just have to, to kind of dig in there and figure it out. And I love talking to young farmers about, just because, their enthusiasm and just embracing of technology and all of that. But I really, really, really love talking to older farmers. Um, I mean, some of my favorite ones have been older farmers who will say, like, "Yeah, my dad, my grandpa, I remember when I was a kid and they were farming with horses, and now they have like these massive tractors and combines on their farm, and like what a huge leap in their lifetime." And it's just so fun to me to talk to them about that, and just how things have changed and how they've just kind of rolled with it. It's that's my favorite. I got a soft spot for the older folks.
So, Lisa, looking at, I'm doing some quick Googling over here. Um, Successful Farming was first published in 1902, and it is 2024 as we are recording this. Um, and people have been saying that print media is dead, which is horribly depressing as someone who, I mean, the internet is amazing. I work for a software company. I love the internet. I do. It's not the same. And especially, I've been traveling a lot more recently, and one of my favorite parts of traveling has always been, stopping at a gas station or stopping at one of those convenience stores in the airport where you will now pay, $16 for a bottle of Coke. Um, one of those joints, and finding an issue of a magazine that I don't normally get, or, finding a whole magazine. I don't normally get something like that. And getting to leaf through it, or getting to, take a bath and read a magazine, which I've heard people do with their iPads, but no, there's no way. That's there's not enough Apple Care in the world for me to try to take a bath with an iPad. Where are you seeing publishing going? What do you like? What is, if you could wave your magic journalist wand and see what's going to happen in the next 122 years, because that's an astounding amount of time to still be publishing something. And looking at the fact that they were the first brand from what is now, I did not realize, Dot Dash Meredith, which is a huge publishing group. What's next? What's keeping you guys from going to, I don't that sounds really bad to be like, what's keeping you from going the way of extinction like so many magazines, but it's so hard to find them.
Yeah, it really is a thing. And I tell you, we have such a wonderful team at Successful Farming from, from the top down. And we we have a fantastic web team, and really web team, I guess I shouldn't even say web team. We call them the web team, but really everyone on staff works with our website and with print. So when I first started, it was different. When I first started 25 years ago, we had a dedicated web team, which I was a part of, and then we had a print team. I did a little writing for print, but mainly I was on the web team. But now everybody does both, and everything's very integrated. And we have people who are so smart, who just know how to, keep things moving on the website, and how to drive traffic, and how to do all that data stuff. I'm just writing. I don't know how to do any of that, but they're so smart, and I trust them, with that. But yeah, I think for me, print, I still get handwritten letters from people, which is just my favorite. I love it so much. And the emails are great, but when someone sits down and writes me a letter, I am writing that person back for sure. And there's just something about a physical piece of print that seems more permanent. I mean, I know they say like the internet is forever, and I'm sure that's true to some extent, but we have boxes of magazines from 1902 in our office. And I can go and pick that magazine up and look through it. And I do. And I love that. And I can read what those folks wrote. And it's permanent. Like, it is a tangible thing I can pick up and feel and physically read. And I just don't see how we can do without that, And for farmers, they're tangible, physical people. I mean, of course, they're reading things on their phones. We see, tons of traffic on our website comes from people who are looking at it on their cell phones. That has changed over time. But there's still something to be said about looking at something in a magazine, whether it's an idea or just an interesting story, and tearing that out or dog-earing that page, and just keeping it. You have it. And I hope that never goes away, because I'm one of those people too. When I'm traveling, I will, I'll buy the local paper of wherever we're staying and just read it. And I don't know. I just think it's such a connection, a physical connection to people and places. And I hope it never goes away, because I love print. But that's just, that's sort of my thought. And I also feel like, when I do go in, I work remotely most of the time, but when I do go into the office, like, the name Successful Farming is carved on the front of our building. And I love that so much. And it just makes me so happy that our little magazine, now in the midst of this massive media conglomerate, like, Lil Us started it. And I'm so proud of us. I just think it's great.
When I think too, and God love the amount of clutter that older people kept, but I know that I'm not the only one whose grandparents had boxes and boxes of National Geographic from decades before we were born. And, my grandparents kept one or several boxes on the front porch under the porch swing, because it was enclosed and you could just sit out there and read these old Nat Geos that are, published 30 years before I was born. And, now like I look at the granary on our farm was the original house, and there is still, they wallpapered it with pages out of, I imagine, probably the Sears catalog, Sears Roebuck, in like 1905, maybe. And there are still pages glued to the walls, and just that tangible heritage that you will never get from digital media. And I think it's so easy to get sucked into how can we do this faster? How can we do this more efficiently without asking if we should do it faster and more efficiently? And I'd love to see what your web team looks like now compared to 1999, because I'm guessing it's real different.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's been really interesting to be along for the whole ride. I mean, we were the first website at our company, and we had very innovative folks who wanted to do it, and the company was like, whatever, I don't know if this internet thing is going to catch on, but just go for it, don't spend a bunch of money, but go for it. And so our team did, and we were one of the first ones. And I mean, obviously we got the URL, we got agriculture.com. So like we were out there early, and it's been fantastic. I mean, the team throughout the years has just been just such pros, amazing journalists and people who are just willing to just keep on learning and figuring out what our readers want. It's been so fun. And now everything is so, there's so many more tools and the data, there's so much more we know about our readers, and we can kind of serve them in a better way, a different way. And it's been really fun to just see the whole thing. But one thing about the print, one of my favorite things that I've done is I love looking through, like I said, I love looking through those old issues of the magazine. And I've done several sort of, articles or slideshows for our website where I'll focus on a theme. So like Christmas covers of the past or whatever. And I just pull out my favorite ones and put them on the website. And I did one of the world wars, and and one of the covers, there was a young woman who was on the cover, who she was sort of having to help her dad run things at home because their hired man had, I believe he had gone into the army or something. And this was like in the early 40s. And so I put this up. This was several years ago, but I put this up on the website. And then I got an email from someone who said, I have seen this cover hanging in my friend's house. That is my friend. And so I got to get in touch with this cover girl as an older woman. And she was like in her, 80s at this point. And I got to talk to her about like, what was it like being 17 and being on the cover of Successful Farming? And like, what happened after that? Like, tell me your life story, So I wrote an article about that and just sort of her life. And like, she got marriage proposals because of that magazine cover. It was amazing.
Well, and
It
just
was so fun.
an amazing thing that obviously was to her that she still had it framed hanging on her wall that many years later, that it was clearly such a formative thing. I'm wondering, since you've been in it for 25 years now, how do you resist feeling too, that meme of the grandpa from The Simpsons yelling at the sky in his lawn? Like, I assume that you're dealing with coworkers or interns or whatever who weren't born when you started there, um, which makes you feel like 800 years old. It's something that I am experiencing at work now, and it's like, I don't feel that old until a coworker's like, "My mom's only 2 years older than you are." And I'm like, "Cool."
I know. I
Um,
know.
how do you not feel too old dude yelling at the sky when like I mentioned floppy disks to my kids are little, but I mentioned there was even like There was some movie that had like a dial-up tone in it the other day, and my kids were like, "What is that horrific noise?" And I was like, "Well, babies, back in the olden days, you know." Um, so how do you deal with the youths without feeling too about it?
Well, it's funny. I feel that all the time. And I always am joking about how when I first started, I was the youngest editor on staff, and now I am the oldest. And we have there's a couple of other folks on staff who are, my age, our art director, are a couple of folks. But as far as just like strict print, editors, I'm the oldest by a lot. And so it's, well, maybe not a lot. That's maybe not fair to say. We have a few that are, a few years behind me, but I'm definitely the oldest. I'm 52. And so we have those moments, and I sort of feel like the work mom sometimes, and it's I kind of love it, because I think back to when I was their age, and I had some fantastic mentors at work. And, also at different, jobs you're at, you have some of the opposite experience. You have some folks who, looking back, you wish could have been a little more supportive of you. And so I just try to remember that. And I just want to support these young folks. And we have a lot of young women on staff too. And I really just want to support them and uplift them and encourage them. So I try really hard to do that. And if I see something that they've written that I especially like, I'll always, I'll let them know, I love what you wrote. It was great. Good job. Keep it up. I'm trying to be a cheerleader for them. And, because I don't feel threatened at all. I know some folks start to feel that way. Um, I don't feel that. I feel like very confident and like comfortable in my role. Um, and I feel like part of my job is to, sort of mentor those folks a bit. And but I tell you what, I do sometimes feel like I'm, Homer's dad out in the yard. And just the other day we had a meeting where they were talking about, there were all these apps and, tools for the web they were talking about, and there's all these words that are like not actual words. you know and I'm sitting there, and I just felt, there's this meme where it's like, slack me on snoozle or whatever, like all, it's just like all these like fake, words. And I was like, I felt like I was living that meme, and I'm like, wait, am I on like Impractical Jokers right now? What is happening? Is this really actually happening? So I have to try a little to keep up with, some of that. But I also just really trust our team, and we're surrounded by really smart people. And I try to be to them what I appreciate I had or wish I had when I was their age.
I really love that perspective too, because you have a lot of value in the organization and so did they. So it isn't a competition, right? You're all there for your own skills and for the things that you contribute. So being able to support each other is the best way to have a workplace.
Absolutely. And some of them are like pretty fresh out of journalism school, and like I graduated from journalism school in 1994. So, although I try to keep up with what's going on, things change. And especially with the web, writing for the web was not a thing when I graduated from college. So, they know what they're talking about. They're all smart people, and I love to hear their perspective. And I never want them to feel like, because they're young, their input is not valuable, because I can learn from them just like they can learn from me. And I try to keep my mind open to that.
I think as someone in tech too, who, I'm later to the game, but it's totally valid to feel threatened or out of touch or whatever at your work, but that is on you and your employer to take care of. If your employer is not valuing you or is not helping you move your career in the direction you want, That's between you and them. That has, your younger coworkers are not making you out of touch or making you insecure or whatever, you know. Hopefully, if you're old enough to be the old coworker, you're a grown ass adult and should be able to, handle your own shit. So there's that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So, Lisa, we end up talking to a lot of our guests about the different ways that they balance farming and off farm work and parenting and all those kinds of things. So, from the way you describe the stages your kids are at now, sounds like they're fairly close together. And so I was curious about the different ways that you manage those things when they were young and through the years as the, stages of family life change and your career changed over time. What were some of the things that worked for your family or maybe didn't work?
Well, I've been just so incredibly lucky. When I tell you, when my kids were, I had 3 kids in 4 years. They're all close together. And at that point, when I had my youngest, I had been with successful farming only about 6 years. So I was still one of the new kids. And it was a lot. I mean, I was either like very pregnant or on maternity leave for like a good chunk of the first 6 years of my career. And so it was kind of a lot to ask, but I had very supportive coworkers and my boss was fantastic. But I was also really, really struggling because I lived an hour away from the office, and daycare in rural America is a difficult thing. I had a woman that I really loved doing daycare, but she had a child who was ill and she was not always available. I was scared that I was gonna, lose my job because I was missing a lot of work for because I had to stay home with my kids. My mom was still working at the time, so I couldn't just dump them off with her. Um, Although she would have loved that. um, so I went and talked to my boss and I was like, I just can't do this anymore. I have to go. And my husband and I had looked at the books and figured out, well, with all the money I'm spending on driving an hour back and forth every day, driving like, a Suburban, that that like we can do this. And so my boss though, God bless him, said, would you like to keep working part-time um from home? And this was in like 2006. So people weren't really doing that at the time. And I was like, yes, please. So I sort of freelance slash worked part-time for 17 years and worked from home. I'd come in the office, and my role changed throughout those years. um, I had to really make an effort to stay a part of the team and to, kind of go after what I wanted career wise while still being at home. But I got to do everything. Like I worked at home. I was there when my kids got off the bus. It was amazing. And then when my youngest graduated from high school, I was able to come back full time. And so now I'm loving that and I'm doing that again and it's the best. But when they were little, um, I mean, it wasn't easy. And during the school year, once they were all in school, it was great because I would work when they were at school. I still had time to go in and be the homeroom mom and go on the field trips and do all the things. And they played sports and they were in scouts and I was their Cub Scout leader. And, we did all the things and it was great. But in the summer, it was hard because I still had to work, and we tried we had a lot of fails and we tried a lot of different things. But finally, what we landed on was a deal. Once my oldest was old enough to keep his brothers from, burning down the house, the deal was I'm going to stay up late and work till like 3 in the morning. I'm going to stay up and work until my work is done. And then I'm going to sleep. And in the morning, you got to let me sleep till I'm done sleeping. And you get up. When you guys get up, just keep everybody alive and eat some cereal and play with your toys or watch cartoons. I don't even care. Whatever. Just stay in the house and stay alive. And then when I get
And quiet enough that I can keep sleeping.
exactly. And then when I wake up, we will do fun things. We'll do, if we have chores or things we need to do, obviously we do that. And then it's like, what should we do today? Let's do something fun today. And it was the best. It was the best. But it took some trial and error to get to that point of figuring out like, okay, this is the deal. I got to give up some sleep. I got to work late, but it was worth it.
I love that creativity too, though, because it's not an approach that would work for everybody. But if your brain and your body works in a way where you can be productive when everyone else is sleeping and it's quiet, and then you can figure out a way to do that and also get some sleep in, because then there's the people who think they can stay awake till 3 o'clock and still get up first thing in the mornings. Or, I mean, people do what they have to do, right? Yeah, that's not a judgment, but the fact that you found a solution that worked and at an age and a stage where your kids could make it happen too, that's a neat way of tackling an issue.
Yeah, I do look at photos of myself from that time though, and it's like, oh my God, I look so tired. I mean, I was so tired. We were all so tired. It's an exhausting time of life when your kids are, that age where you got to like keep an eye on them all. Your eyes are on them all the time, and you're always having to like do things and make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And it's exhausting, but it's great. It was so fun.
Our goal as podcasters is to create a program that makes you feel less alone as a farming, ranching, or homesteading parent, but we can't do it alone.
Supporting Barnyard Language on Patreon helps us cover production costs and ensures the future of the show, but you'll also gain access to exclusive perks and behind-the-scenes content.
Your support enables us to continue bringing you the thought-provoking conversations and inspiring stories week after week. So if you find value in what we're doing and want to be part of the Barnyard community, head over to patreon.com/barnyardlanguage and choose a tier that suits you.
So, Lisa, what was it like working remotely before working remotely was a thing? I mean, it's even in, the year of our Lord 2024 in rural Iowa. Now, after the pandemic, I know a handful of folks who work remotely. Pre-pandemic, I think I knew one person who worked remotely. And it's still, it's totally normal in a lot of places to work from home. But in rural Iowa, it's still kind of a novelty to a lot of folks. And I'm wondering how you dealt with that, especially, being home with 3 little ones and presumably even worse internet than we have now. And, just how you dealt with that, because it's a whole thing now. And I mean, now, I work for a company that's all remote, and, this is just the normal way of doing things. But I imagine it was not like that when you started doing it.
No, it was not. We had satellite internet, and it was so bad. So bad. I really had to sort of plan my work around internet, around access. My parents lived 25 minutes away in town, and they had much better internet than what we had. So sometimes it would be, we would go into town, I would download things or upload things that needed to be downloaded or uploaded. And then I would kind of work, off my computer without having to use a ton of internet in the other times. And it was good enough to do some things, like I could post an article to the website or something like that. That didn't take a lot of bandwidth, but I couldn't even do like this, from in those days. I couldn't do like a Zoom interview or anything like that. So it was, and I wasn't traveling in those days. When I was working part-time, I did not travel. So any interviews I did, it was, if it wasn't close, it was over the phone. Unless I just happened to be somewhere. And I always kind of like, when I go on vacation, I'm always like oh, there's a farmer. I should go interview while I'm here. So, never really completely off the clock, but it's because I love it. But yeah, it was really a challenge with the internet. And I did go into the office, some too. And I would plan those days where I would think like, okay, I am working on a project where I have some big photos that I need to deal with, or layouts. Layouts are really difficult. So I would just say like, okay, this one day I'm going into the office and I'm going to do all the things I need great internet for while I'm in the office. I just had to plan.
And yeah, those are the days you cross your fingers and hope none of the kids get sick, or you get a call from the school or anything.
Yeah, that's always the way that it went too, it was a lot easier once my parents retired because then they could help with that kind of thing, and they were amazing and so helpful with all of that.
If you could give any advice today to the younger parent version of you, what would you tell her?
You know, at the time, I remember worrying that I wasn't doing a good enough job, and worrying that like, oh, I have too many irons in the fire, or I'm just scrambling to get everything done. And I thought I was the only one who felt like that, but now I realize that like that's just what it is. Everyone feels like that. And I would just tell myself to just relax, because like my kids are great, and they're really good people. And that's what counts. They're awesome. And so just take it easy and try to enjoy the little moments. I always tried to like take mental snapshots of like perfect moments, and just say to myself, like, this is a perfect moment. And like, click, like, just take that like mental snapshot to like look back on later, but I would just tell myself to just kind of just savor the moment, because it goes fast. I mean, my kids are big now, and I love having big kids, but those little kids were just precious, and I miss that too. And I think the other thing I would tell myself is I lost both my parents in the last couple of years, and my mother-in-law, and I would encourage myself to be a little bit less uptight about the grandparent spoiling. That was the thing that like always kind of secretly or not so secretly irritated me and my husband. And we'd be like, you can't spend more on our kids than we can afford to spend. That's not right. Or, like they come home covered in sugar or whatever, whatever it is. And and I really wish that I could see that again and just laugh about it, because those kind of little things just bring so much joy to my parents and to my kids, and it doesn't hurt anybody. And I'm in the phase now where I just look back on that and I think how great it was that my parents were like that, and my in-laws too. They were amazing with our kids. And I wish I could have uh enjoyed it more in the moment and been less worried about my kids getting spoiled, and just let them appreciate the spoiling.
That's a good reminder because, yeah, as a parent, it's easy to think, oh, like the sugar that they just ate is has impacts on me or whatever. But more kids, no, more people loving our kids is never a problem, right? As long as they have people who are loving on them, then that's good for all of us.
So, Lisa, as we're talking about things the internet has ruined, part 27, I don't know what we're up to. Talk to me about cookbooks. I mean, as I am someone who obviously will still buy paper cookbooks, despite the fact that they are for fun and not for, when I need a recipe quick to cook something for my kids, it's the internet all the way. But cookbooks are so beautiful, and there's such a story in so many of them, and the recipes are actually tested. And unless you're reading one of those that's 15 minutes, Rachel Ray, I'm looking at you, you know The recipes are all 15 minutes. If you have a prep cook, everything is already prepped and somebody else cleans up, and your water is already boiling when it hits the stove. That's the part that kills me. Tell us about cookbooks and tell us what we should be cooking for dinner tonight, because I am out of ideas. And weirdly, my family thinks I'm going to feed them every day.
God, the expectations are just out of control.
The big one's almost 8. She should be able to handle this by now. But
Oh, come on, make some dinner, kid. Oh, yeah, that's one thing too with like being sort of empty nesters. And my husband travels sometimes, so if it's just me or just me and him, we're like, charcuterie question mark. Sounds like a plan. But I love cookbooks, and I've worked on a few. I wrote one with, there's a restaurant called the Machine Shed. I don't know, it's a Midwest sort of thing.
it's the one right there on I-80, isn't it? That's their claim to fame. See?
Yeah. So, and there's, I think they have in Wisconsin maybe too. But anyway, when I was part-time working from home, one of my projects was writing this cookbook. And I had, recipes from the Machine Shed. Their giant cinnamon rolls are on the cover, and I just made those over Thanksgiving break. And fantastic. So yummy. Sometimes food for sure, but so good. And then also, just, we have a benefit at work. I have a recipe in every issue of Successful Farming. I write the family section, among other things, and there's always a recipe in the family section. And if for whatever reason, there were a couple of times where, unbeknownst to me, at the last minute, the recipe got cut. And let me tell you what, we heard about it from our readers, because they look for the recipe, and I was as surprised as anyone to hear about it, because I mean, I didn't know, but yeah, they want the recipe. So we are a sister publication to Better Homes and Gardens. So they are physically in our office. The Better Homes and Gardens test kitchen is just down the stairs from my office. And if you ever get the chance to visit,
I say, Lisa, I will drive to Des Moines and meet you there, because
I will give you a tour. It is amazing.
if there's something I love, it's just the concept of a test kitchen. But I'm gonna detour us for a second. How often do things go really horribly wrong in that test kitchen? Because I'm guessing that it's probably like pretty chill, but I like to think that there's like explosions and like smoke and lots of lab coats, which is probably not right.
It's kind of sciencey.
Especially Better Homes and Gardens seems.
It's more of a science experiment kitchen.
Yeah. Oh, there's such pros. Um, when I first started, when we would run a recipe in the magazine, we probably had our budgets were probably a lot bigger then, because we would say to the test kitchen, hey, we want to run a recipe for, I don't know, meatloaf or whatever it is. And they would whip up like 4 recipes of meatloaf, and we would go down and eat them and be like, I like this one. And that's the one we'd use. But now, that's not really how it works now. Now everything's digital. All the recipes are, stored in our little server digitally, and I have certain ones that I can access and use, and they've all been tested in the test kitchen, which is so great. But in the test kitchen, it's so cool, because you would think it would be this like super high end, incredibly fancy kitchen, and they do have that, but they have many kitchens in the test kitchen, and they have kitchens with stoves that look like my mom's stoves that look like anybody's kitchen, regular old appliances, because they test these recipes multiple times in these different kitchens, because it's not just, will this recipe turn out on the latest and greatest high tech, appliances, but can your average person make this recipe in their home and have it turn out on this sort of like half janky stove? And
Only one burner works.
yeah, exactly. They really do it. And they they make notes about it. They are so meticulous, and it is fantastic. It's just so cool to just be in the same building with them. And the test garden is there too. So like if you're into gardening, it's just right outside the door. It's I love being their neighbor. It's so cool. But yeah, I loved writing the cookbook. I used some Better Homes recipes. I used some Machine Shed recipes, and it was just super fun. It was honestly like a thrill for me to have my name on a book. Like I wrote this thing, and it was great. Um, I also we used to have a publication called Living the Country Life, which now is just digital, a sort of a part of our agriculture.com website now, but it was a print magazine for a while, and it was geared more toward acreage owners. And I wrote a blog for that website that was called Lisa's Kitchen. And so I would just do my own recipes for that. And that was like a total sort of, your typical kitchen blog of like, I made this thing and here's how it went and here's what my kids thought and here's a photo. And then when that website,
And you have to read all that before you can get to the ingredients, right?
yes, you know that. So, and that irritates me so much when I'm doing looking, but this was like kind of at the beginning of that era. But that's no longer online, but I am so thankful that I went through and I just copied all of that into a giant Google Doc. So in my Google Drive, I have my entire blog. So I can go back and look up those recipes for my kids because those were the things I was making when they were young. So that's where I get a lot of my recipes is from my old blog, and it has a lot of my mom's recipes in there too. So the go-to, like, what should we have for dinner? Meatloaf is always a go-to, that's easy and it's delicious. But I love to make like homemade chicken and noodles. That was my mom's like kind of signature dish. And making homemade noodles is just so, I don't know, it's kind of therapeutic. It doesn't take a lot of time. It's really not that hard. It seems like it would be hard if it's not a thing you've done, but it's not. It's easy. And also, I love to eat noodle dough. So
So the process is more fun that way.
it is. My mom would call us like, noodle hawks because we'd come in and like scrounge for dough. But yeah, just a big pot of like hot chicken and noodles and like some mashed potatoes or biscuits or whatever you want. Um to serve them on, like it's such a great comfort food. And yeah, that's what I would make for dinner.
So, Lisa, I'm going to interrupt. Chicken and noodles was our special family dish too, and my grandma never wrote down the recipe because she lived in Ohio, but yeah, same difference. And for the rest of the world, we're not talking about soup. It is chicken and noodles. There is enough broth to cook the noodles, but that's it. There's none of this soupy shit. It's the good part of the soup without all the crap that nobody actually cares about.
Exactly. There's no vegetables in chicken and noodles.
Oh, I usually put some vegetables in because I'm a heathen, but I can feel my grandmother rolling over in her grave every time I do it.
Yeah, I will serve corn on the side because Iowa. And I like to mix the corn in with the chicken and noodles. I normally don't like my food to touch, but corn does not count. Like I will put corn in with my chicken and noodles. Corn is everything.
Corn's not a food. It's just like it's like salt.
Yeah, it is. And for Iowans, corn is just, yeah, exactly.
So, Lisa, what I'm gonna ask, and feel free to say no because I know how people are about recipes. Would you share your chicken noodle recipe? I mean, you can just like send it to us and we'll put it on the website.
I absolutely would. It was, you know what? It was the very first thing I put on the blog because, and it's funny because when I called my mom to ask for the recipe so that I could like, do it for the blog, she was like, recipe? Okay. She had to like go through it in her mind because she didn't have a recipe. And she kind of did. And so I ended up just going over there and we made them together, and I just like made notes of how she made it, which I'm so thankful that I did because, now I can make it and it tastes just like hers. And my kids are like, "Oh, it's just like grandma's," and it's like, I love it. It just makes me happy to be able to do that.
I really want to stress the importance of watching how they do it and adding notes to their recipe because I have my great great grandmother's sugar cookie recipe, which is theoretically the one that my grandmother used. I'm sure it's the recipe she started with. It's sure as hell not the recipe she made. And I have no idea what she did in the intervening time. And I mean, I cooked professionally for a lot of years. I feel like probably if I invested enough time, I could figure it out. But it's also been 25 years since I've had her cookies. So, you're also going with what memory has done to the experience. And honestly, I think if I don't have my grandma's Tupperware and I don't have her hall cupboard, it wouldn't matter how right the cookies were. Um, like really having a moment here. I come from a big Irish German family. Like, if I can't feed you, I am lost. Like, feeding people is my love language. And yeah, my little boy just asked for chicken noodle for dinner just like 2 nights ago. Cause yeah, we're chicken noodle people for sure. But random internet recipes for chicken noodle is not.
Oh, no. No, that's not the way. Yeah, I was going to make turkey and noodles over Thanksgiving break. That was one of the things my boys requested when they came home from college. But my husband smoked the turkey this year, and he just did breasts, and they were so delicious. We just gobbled them all up, and there was none left. So I did not have leftovers, but I promised them as soon as you get home for Christmas break, chicken and noodles are happening. So yeah,
Yeah, because you have to have that carcass to just cook.
you do, you do, you do. I've gone through the same sort of thing like you talked about with the cookies with my mother-in-law's rolls. She was an amazing cook. And I have her recipe for rolls, which was like her sort of most famous thing. And I have tried, but I cannot. I cannot. I've gotten like the taste is similar, but the texture's not right, or the shape is just kind of wrong. And she did this adorable thing when my kids were little where she would make rolls, and then she also had these tiny like 4x4 inch pans, and she would make these little tiny like marble sized rolls, like 12 in this little 4x4 pan for each of my kids. And so we'd all have these rolls, and my kids would have these like 12 little marble sized rolls to eat, and it was just like so precious. It was the best.
In our family, it was, and sorry, Arlene, I promise this will stop being a cooking show in a couple minutes. My grandmother's stove, the Maytag company bought for their museum in Newton when my grandma moved out of her house because it was so old and in such good condition, and it had a soup pot built into the top of the stove. Like it was one of those, with the two warming doors on the sides. And yeah, it's just not the same. And it's in our family it was jelly boats, when you cut out pie crust and then you have the little scraps left over and you fold them into like a little canoe shape and fill them with jelly and bake them, and it, some of it spills out and burns, and it's I just want a whole pan of jelly boats. If anyone needs me, I'll be in the kitchen making noodles and jelly boats.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So many memories tied up in food, and the hands that made it. So
I just have one quick question about test kitchens before we move on. So, do you think the test kitchen people sample the food as they're going, and do they have to make notes about the fact that they sampled it as they're going along? Like licking fingers or
I'm sure. Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, they're total pros for sure, but they also are like regular folks, and they are aiming to cook like regular people. So I'm sure that they do. And I've seen notes for some of the recipes, and they'll have notes at different stages, of the recipe. So I gotta believe they do.
yeah, they probably would do.
So, Lisa, if I can ask one favor, I'm going to need you to go down there and suggest to whoever runs that joint that they should really step up the challenge in the test kitchen to really accurately reflect what it's like to be a home cook, especially if you have kids, if you're farming, you have dogs. If they need me to bring my kids and my dogs and the 28 pairs of shitty boots that are always in the middle of the kitchen floor, let me know. Because I really feel like, they're in a test kitchen, but like,
Yeah, did they have a toddler clinging to their waist or a baby crying? Yeah.
it's clean and quiet. Is there an Australian Shepherd throwing her own toy around the kitchen trying to get attention?
Do you hear a moo outside the window where there should not be a moo?
Yes, yeah, that's right. Is the phone ringing?
How sticky are things?
Did someone just show up at your door?
Oh, that's great.
Has your son stolen one measuring cup and is now, my baby is lobbying his teacher collects lemons? And my child legitimately asked if he could take 2 of my measuring cups because they're yellow and give them to his teacher. He was going to leave me, they're Pioneer Woman, so they're multicolored. I can keep the red, the pink, and the blue, but he's going to need the yellow ones.
Very kind, but no.
That's very sweet.
And my 1 cup measure disappeared years ago. I'm pretty sure it's in the sandbox. So I'm going to need Test Kitchen to step it up to that level of.
I just bought new measuring cups and it felt like such a grown-up thing to do. Like I had just been using, I don't know, just junk I had since I was married probably. And I just looked at it one day and I was like, why am I using this junk? And thought, I'm a grown-up now. I can buy my own like aesthetically pleasing measuring cups.
And it's not like it's a big investment, but yet we continue to use the same stuff, right? I'm picturing my cabinet right now. I've got one where the handle's broken off. It's like, why do I not just, it's the 1 cup. That's the one you use the most. Go ahead and get a new one.
This feels like how every grandma, mother-in-law, whatever, has a pot holder with a hole burned through the damn thing that she knows is there. So it's not a problem to her.
Yeah, because she'll work around it.
Anyone else who cooks in there is going to burn themselves. Always. It's like, it must be a law. I don't know if you get that at a certain age or like.
We might be there. Who knows?
I feel like I'm there. Yeah.
I feel like if I had more pot holders, I would definitely be there.
You don't just use your sleeve. Wait.
Yeah, I normally use a dish towel.
Yeah.
You know where it is, right? All right, we're going to go back to some kid questions.
Okay.
Just a few more. So what did you find the most challenging phase or phases when you were parenting kids? And maybe it's right now, who knows? But what were your kind of the points where you felt like it was the most challenging for you?
Yeah. When they were small, and I mean like when they were like 1, 3, and 5, and I had to go anywhere, that was so hard,
Yes.
Because you're dealing with like all the car
seats. Walk outside the door.
Oh my God. All the car seats and all the just like everything. And always having to keep an eye on them. And like, even though we did a lot of things, we'd go to the pool, we did everything. But then you're like, oh my God, where's my kid? You turn your head for 1 second and like they're gone. And I have boys, they're wild. They're feral animals when they're that age, and well, they still kind of are, honestly, but
you don't have to keep your eyes on them.
They're a little more self-sufficient now. I don't worry about them like getting abducted by strangers or whatever. But yeah, so that age was hard. I think just because it was just so exhausting, and I was tired and I was trying to do everything, and it was just, and again, my mom hadn't retired yet, so she couldn't like be my helper as much as I wanted her to be. So that was hard. But really nothing was as hard as when they left for college. And honestly, I take that back. Honestly, the building up to the oldest leaving for college was probably the hardest part of my parenting so far. When he was a senior, my oldest, so at that point I had a senior, junior, and a freshman. My oldest two, they have September birthdays, so my oldest two are only 1 grade apart, and even though they're 2 years, and so that whole senior, it was also COVID year, so that just added an extra layer of emotional instability to everything.
Yeah,
but that year, I cried so many tears. Oh God, I cried so many tears that year just thinking about him leaving and how our lives were not going to be the same. Our family was not going to be the same. We were not going to be a party of 5. We were going to be forever changed, and it was going to just ruin everything. And even though I wanted him to go and I was excited for him and proud of him and he needed to go, I was just devastated, and I just cried and cried and cried. And then when he actually left, we took him down, we got him moved in, and it was, again, COVID. So it was really a difficult, like, everyone was wearing masks, and it was just like, it was just so, it was just an awful year. But as soon as I got home, and I mean, I didn't like cry all the way home. It wasn't like a big emotional scene. It was a little tough. But once I saw him like thriving and having fun with his roommate and enjoying his classes, and, not that it was all sunshine and roses, because it wasn't, but he was okay. And I saw that he was okay. And I also knew that I also still got to see him and talk to him. And I realized, like, okay, Lisa, just stop. Like, I wouldn't take that away from him just to have him back in my house, and that made it a easier the next year when my middle son went. But then I had one kid at home, and that was hard too, because it's just, you want to give him all the spoiling and all the love, and like, but he's also trying to like sort of be independent, and you're like, love me.
Yeah, he's like,
And
love me less.
oh God, he's like, leave me alone. And then, when he left, it was really tough when he left, because we came home and it was like, okay, now what? You know? Um and I'm very thankful that they're only a couple hours away. We get to see them very often, and we text, whatever, but I miss them like crazy. And it's hard being in this phase where my kids aren't just here. That's the hardest
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah.
I'm happy for them,
I
I'm
know
excited for them, but it's tough.
yeah, we're recording right now in December, and I'm in countdown mode for when my daughter is done exams and gets to come back home for Christmas break.
Yeah.
It's definitely an interesting phase. Are
Yeah.
there things about being an empty nester, like things that you feel like you were putting off or waiting until your kids left, that it's like, and now I or we are going to do these things? Or is it more kind of figuring out, what you are wanting to do now that you don't have kids in the house?
Yeah. It's our lives really, my life really just like made a complete 180. And I think it happened kind of all at once, where like I lost my parents and became an empty nester all within the same time frame.
That's a lot.
So
Yeah.
it was a whole lot. And so um I went from being like the person in the middle to like the only person,
Right. Yeah,
And
the sandwich
yeah.
generation, and all of a sudden you're just
Yes.
the center.
And I'm just like, you know, just out there by myself. And I mean, I have my husband, of course, who's fantastic, but it's very weird to sort of like not be responsible on a daily basis for anyone but myself. And it's kind of great, but it's kind of sad. So, what really changed, I guess, other than just the logistics of dealing with like grief and my parents' things and the house and all this stuff, my husband and I have really started to think about like, okay, what do we want our lives to look like, And he travels, some for work. I'll go with him sometimes if I'm working, because I'm working remotely. I can work from a hotel room, whatever. And we take some weekends and do little weekend trips once in a while, for just for kicks. So that's the kind of thing where we could have done before, but we really didn't, because honestly, we just really like our kids, and if we're going somewhere, we just want to take them with us because they're fun. But
And
they're
there was
off.
livestock to consider, right?
Yes. And yeah, and so now like they're having their own fun, and while they'll still go with us on big vacations because we're paying for them, and because I like to think they enjoy our company, but
Yes, yeah,
also
both, for
we're
sure.
paying for those plane tickets or whatever it is. um you know it is nice to just spend some time with my husband and just have fun. We're getting together with some friends now, like friends from when we were first dating, that were like, we all ran around together, and then we all had kids and everybody got busy, and now we're like, hey, we're all empty nesters now. Like, let's
Yeah,
go
that's right.
out.
We
So
don't have to
we
go to
go
kids'
out.
sports tournaments anymore on the weekends.
Oh my
We could do
God,
something
yes.
together.
So we go out and we talk about A, how cool we used to be, and then B, like hip replacements and like magnesium and like, like, and then we're
And
like,
what all your
who
kids are
are
doing.
we? We used to be so cool. What happened?
Yeah.
Oh God.
So first off, I want to say I'm sorry for your loss, for your, of your
Yeah.
parents, and I don't know how that feels, but I am a little bit of a sandwich at this point because I know in the last year my parents have had a lot of health complications and things have been getting trickier, and you start to feel pulled in different directions. Do you have any advice for people who are in that stage of trying to both support their parents and still have kids at home and trying to juggle that balancing act with also all the other responsibilities of life?
Oh, it is so hard. It's so, so hard. My in the midst of my own parents, my mother-in-law passed in between my mom and my dad. My mom passed away 2 years ago. She had some health issues, but it was just like it was very unexpected. Like she just was gone. And at the time it was like, how could this happen? It was horribly traumatic that she was just gone. But then after seeing like my mother-in-law had Alzheimer's and I was her caregiver, and what a just shit show, and it was so, so hard. Hard for her, hard for me, hard for everybody. And I just would not wish that on my worst enemy. And after, seeing that, and then I'm just so thankful for my mom, for like the way my mom just went. And my dad had a lot of health issues and then went in the hospital feeling different and found out he had cancer and died a week later. So it was
Wow.
like, what is happening? Cancer? Like that was so weird. But it was a good, this sounds so weird to say, but like it was a good last week, and it was like a good death as far as deaths go. Everyone was there. Everyone got to say what they wanted to say. My dad wanted to be baptized. We got him baptized. He, you know, he, it was good. It was peaceful, everyone was at peace with it. And he missed my mom, and he was never the same after my mom died. So it was, it was okay. I miss my parents like crazy. I miss my in-laws like crazy. My father-in-law's been gone for several years. And my mother-in-law was gone, you know, mentally and
Right.
emotionally
Yeah,
for
she
a
was
few
here,
years.
but it
She
wasn't
was
her.
here, but
Yeah.
she wasn't here. Yeah. And
Mhm.
that was really, really tough. And I found myself taking care of everyone. I was trying to work. I was taking care of my mother-in-law. I was missing out on time with my own parents because I was so invested in taking care of my mother-in-law. I had my own kids who needed things. Everybody understood that there was times where I just had to do what I had to do for her or for whatever. And we did have other care for her the last year of her life, but I was her POA. I had to do all the things, And I remember just going out into my yard once. Thank God I lived in the country, but just going out into my yard and just screaming at the top of my lungs, like, why is my life such a shit show? Just screaming. And I honestly felt really better after that. Like, that's a good thing. People should just do once in a while. And luckily, like I said, I was in the country and no one called the cops, so that was good. But I think my advice looking back, that was really hard on me. Like I was in not a good place. Mentally, emotionally, physically, it was hard on my health. So my number one piece of advice, something I have done since then, but I wish I would have done sooner, is go to therapy. So
We'll
that's
all
number
applaud.
one.
Yes.
Yes.
And it
Um,
probably at the time would have felt like just one more thing,
oh
right?
my God, yes.
Add
Yes.
one more thing to this giant list of things that I
Yeah.
need
Like
to be
now I got to do
responsible for.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about my feelings. I don't want to. I don't have
Right.
time.
I
Right?
just want to go in the yard and scream. I don't want
Yeah,
to talk.
that's how I feel.
Yeah,
Listen to the
exactly.
pitch of my scream. That will tell you.
Right, right, exactly. But that's my number one piece of advice is get some therapy when you're in that situation to kind of help you just get some perspective and also mind your own mental health because I was in not a good place, and I feel like I was not great to be around for a while. And it was just really tough. And it's even in the best of circumstances, even if you're not dealing with Alzheimer's or like other illnesses, when your parents are older, they need you, and you need to step up, and you also have your own kids. It's just hard even in the best of circumstances. So get some therapy, pay attention to how you feel. If therapy is not your thing, try online therapy. If that's not your thing, find a friend who will listen to you and just let you rant. Um, you know, it, it- just get those feelings out and don't bottle it up. And also ask for help. We
Yes.
sort of tend to get in this thing where like I'm just going to do it because it's easier for me to just do it. I know how to do it. I know how it needs to be done. I'll just do it and then it's done and it's fine. But that's not great either.
Right.
So
Yeah. And then
asking for help.
that can lead to a
Oh,
lot of resentment too, right? Where you're thinking,
yes.
no one's helping me, but
Yeah.
I'm the
People
only
were
one who can do
offering.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I did, after my mom died, and I was still caring for my mother-in-law, and I did feel some resentment there because like the time I missed out with my mom where I was caring for my mother-in-law, and I talked to my dad about that, and he said, "Lisa, your mom was so proud of you for taking care of her like you were, and that it just really was a good example for your kids." And it was, although maybe the screaming in the yard, not so much, but
Well, I mean, you got to let it out, right? It
I
was better than
guess.
screaming at them
Yeah, I
because you
was
might
just
have felt
screaming
like
at
that too at times.
God, the world. I don't know,
Yeah.
but yeah, but knowing and having my dad say that was really nice because of course I wish I had that time back with my mom, but knowing that she was proud of me for stepping up and taking care of my mother-in-law, um it was hard, I it, she's my mother-in-law, she wasn't my mom, but I loved her, and she was a wonderful mother and grandmother, and I'm glad I did it. Now at the time I felt like I had to because I was the only one who would or could. But looking back, I'm really thankful that I did, just because she deserved it. She was amazing.
Well, I know that none of them would have had the chance to say it, but thank you. And
Oh,
I know that, you know, your kids, like your dad said, your kids are watching your actions, and not our kids aren't the only ones who are watching, but but being a caregiver is hard work,
it is.
and it often feels thankless. So thank you for
Yeah.
doing that.
Oh, thank you for saying that. And yeah, so now my kids, hopefully when my husband and I are old, they'll be like,
That's
"Yeah,
right.
remember when mom used to go out in the yard and scream? I get it now."
She's a lot, but I'll keep taking care of her.
She's insane, but I get it.
So we've been talking for a while, and I think we're going to move to our county fair question. But first, one thing we
Okay.
ask just about everybody is, what was your favorite thing about raising kids on the farm?
Oh, seeing them just learn lessons that I feel like they might not have gotten otherwise was so great. Watching them have to solve problems together. Once they were old enough to do that, we sort of stood back and watched them figure out like little things, from like, how do we get water to this tank, to like, what's going on with this fence? Why isn't it working? Um, Watching them solve problems together and be a team and like kind of rely on each other and figure out their own shit was really great. And now they're like productive members of society, and I love that. But also I really, really loved just having room for them to run, and they just would tear around and they'd camp in the back 40, and they were just wild, and it was so great. They'd shoot their bows and arrows, and they'd, get their little guns out and shoot, and they'd have targets up on hay bales, and it was good stuff. It was just really good stuff.
All right, so we ask all of our guests, if you were going to dominate a category at the county fair, what would it be?
I think it would be party planning. So my mom always said that planning a party is as much fun as having a party. And she is right. I have ADHD, so I have like project brain. So when I get a project like, let's have a party, I mean, we don't throw a ton of parties, but like things like graduations, and when my parents died, we didn't have funerals. We had celebrations of life, and I like rented a hall and had food and music and the whole thing, like a party. And because I'm like, you know what? That's what they would like, and that's what I want to do. So that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's
And
right. And you want
yeah,
it's about being together with other people,
yeah.
right? It can be whatever you want it to be.
Exactly. So that's what I did. So I just love every detail of it, from like finding the perfect like photo backdrops and food and having a theme, and just scouring the internet for like exactly the right things. And um I love that. That's my jam.
Well, I will come to one of your parties. You just send the invitation.
They're pretty strong.
Yeah. All right, so we will move into our cussing and discussing segment. If you're a listener and want to submit yours, you can either use our speak pipe or send us an email. Katie, what are you cussing and or discussing this week?
Well, I was just going to discuss death, but I think
Keeping it
I'm going to
light,
go.
right?
Yeah, death, money, and how we feel about people. Not talking about dying will not keep you from dying. It doesn't work that way. Writing a will not actually kill you, probably. I mean, you never know. You might fall down the stairs at the lawyer's office. I don't know. Sign the damn thing before you leave the office. That's all I'm saying. But people act like if we never talk about death, if we never admit that having a chance to say goodbye and then hopefully dying fairly quickly and painlessly after that is a good death. I mean, that's, we might hope that person is really, really old and has been really healthy and happy until then. But that's really all we can ask for. And not talking about money does not fix money problems. It doesn't keep your family from fighting about money. It doesn't keep the bank from wanting their money. If you don't talk about it, it will still happen. But what else will happen is that nobody is prepared and nobody knows what you want. And it's the same thing with not telling people that we love them, because you don't keep getting more chances, and they don't know if you don't tell them, unless you feed them a lot. Then they
Yes,
will
if you give
know,
them chicken and
because
noodles, they'll know you love them.
yeah, yeah. Um that's it. People don't know what you want unless you tell them. And that goes for what your funeral looks like, because I'm leaving Lisa in charge of mine. I feel like we're on the same wavelength about this. I actually have it written in my living will that I want prop me up beside the jukebox played at mine, because
Do
I
you
feel like
literally want to be
that
propped
is
up
the
beside the
vibe I am
jukebox?
setting here. I, whatever your traditions are is great. I find visitations and viewings to be real creepy. I don't like people looking at me while I'm alive. The idea of them looking at me dead is worse. I want people to have a beer, to have a good laugh, to tell stories, maybe shed a few tears, maybe, some real drunken renditions of Danny Boy or whatever, because we're
She's
Irish.
getting real specific now.
It's like a law, right? But I want people to look back at it and go, what a fantastic way to wrap this up, and what a good way to finish it. And money the same way, what a good way to pass it on, what a good way to communicate with our family, what a good way to show our values.
Or
And the
what a
same thing
what a
with
good way
telling,
to spend it all right at the end.
yeah, what a good way to throw one holy hell of a party on the way out, and just, you don't keep getting more chances. And if you don't tell people what you want and what you value, you won't get it. You might not get it anyway.
Yeah,
But
that's
if
true.
you don't tell them what you want, you're
You definitely
definitely
won't.
not going
Yeah.
to get it. Because presumably it's not going to become a social norm to start playing rocking country songs and getting shit-faced drunk at funerals, which is probably just as well, because I'm guessing there's a lot of people that would not be acceptable
Well,
to.
if it doesn't reflect your life, then it's not your funeral. So
Yeah.
it's not for everyone.
No. So, Lisa, what do you have to cuss and discuss?
Well, first of all, I love this idea for a segment. It's so great. And you're right on about your topic. I kind of touched on this earlier, but I think just the whole I've seen it a lot more lately. It feels like about just the general, just sort of meanness that we're feeling in the world, on the internet, even in real life. Where I always used to say that old line about how like people say mean things on the internet because they know they're not going to get punched in the face like they would in real life. But lately, I don't know if it's because of like election stuff or just general world things. But it just feels like people are just so mean, and I just don't get it. I just interviewed this woman named Sarah Morton on the podcast and for the magazine. I had heard her speak at a Women in Agribusiness Summit in Denver earlier this year. This woman, she's a farmer from Virginia. She is so amazing, and she should do TED Talks. She had all these amazing quotes, but the thing that stuck with me the most is she was talking about women and she was talking about people of color, and she was saying, we need to do a better job of supporting each other. And her quote was, "We lift as we climb." And I thought that was so good, that like as we are going through our life and working our way up, whatever that means for us, that it does not hurt us to lift other people, to uplift other people. And it takes really no different amount of energy to say something nice than just to say something hateful. Um, I mean, I haven't always been like the nicest person, and I certainly have those like nasty, thoughts in my mind too. I try not to say them, but sometimes it happens, I'm not perfect. I've certainly said things online that I wish I hadn't said. It happens to the best of us. But I just think it's becoming more and more of a norm for people to just like be ugly and hateful, and I just feel like we need to stop.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and assuming the worst of others rather than assuming the best. I
Yeah.
mean, like, what what does it get you if you're looking at it from that negative viewpoint where you're always assuming that someone else is out to get you, or that someone else is wrong, or that you need to prove that you're right, or any of those things, right? It just and
Right.
then it becomes self-fulfilling, because what you look for you find.
Yeah. And once you live a little life, you realize that like you really do not know what is going on in someone else's life, you
Yes,
know?
absolutely.
So just to kind of stay in your lane, mind your business, let people do what they're going to do. It doesn't affect you. Just move on.
Mm-hmm. Katie, do you want mine?
Arlene, I would love yours.
So mine,
Sorry, I had muted myself because there's a lot of things going on in my house right now. But here I
um,
am.
there you are. So mine is much lighter than death or being nice on the internet. Mine is just, and I don't even know if I've done this one before. We've done a lot of episodes, so this may have been a cussing and discussing in the past, but I'm going to add it in again. It just reminded me today, the excess of media that I want to consume that there just literally isn't time for. Whether it be the stack of magazines that comes into our house every month because, lots of ag publications are still out there, and so many of them are great, and people are putting a lot of time and effort into creating them, and I want to read them, but I don't always get through them until the next round happens. Although right now, when we're recording, Canada Post is on strike, so I'm not getting any publications. So now
Oh
we're going to have an
no.
even bigger stack when they do finally come in. But add to that all the podcasts I want to listen to, and all the online, stories and things that I know are out there and I want to see. And even the stuff that people are putting on social media, like people are sharing their lives. Every time I go on our Barnyard Language Instagram or Facebook, I look at all the amazing accounts out there and the people that are sharing of themselves and about their farms and their families, and that, like I do actually want to consume that content, but there's only so many hours in the day, and you got to do other stuff too. But yeah, there's just too much. It's great, but yeah, I can't do it all.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of an amazing time where we just really have everything at our fingertips, like all
Mm-hmm.
the information, all of the resources. We can read library books without going to the library. We have everything right at our
Yeah.
fingertips, and it's great. But it's so hard to choose.
Yes, yeah,
Right.
my library online holds list is ridiculous. It's like, who
Same.
in my lifetime will I read 2,000 books? Maybe. But
And then when it comes time to check one out, I'm like, I don't even know. It takes me an hour to decide.
yes, yeah, exactly. You search by the what's available, look at my holds list, and yeah, Libby is fantastic, but yeah, it
So
just
good.
brings all of the possibilities into list form, and that becomes a lot too.
Exactly.
So we didn't actually even talk about your podcast, but can we tell people where to find you online and what you've got going out in the world?
Absolutely. So, in addition to writing for Successful Farming and Agriculture.com, earlier this year, I took over our relatively new podcast venture called 15 Minutes with a Farmer. We have a few other shows at Successful Farming, but this one I am now hosting. I love it. It's so much fun. I mean, I just like to talk to people and talk to farmers, and it's just another way I get to do that. So, you can just go to agriculture.com and or go to Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcasts and just search for 15 Minutes with the Farmer. And that's where we are. So, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, you guys, it's been so much fun to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you for joining us on Barnyard Language. If you enjoy the show, please support us on Patreon with a donation.
Big thanks go out to our show editor, Krista Paffrath at the Rural Podcast Network.
Please rate and review the podcast wherever you listen and follow the show so you never miss an episode.
If you want to connect with other farming families, join the private Barnyard Language Facebook group.
We are always in search of future guests for the podcast. If you or someone you know would like to chat with us, get in touch.